Hi, everybody. How are y'all doing? Perfect. Yeah, it's Bettina said, I'm Jim Lee from Sumter, South Carolina, down here in good old USA. And I've been studying geoengineering, weather modification, space weather modification, and artificial clouds, aka plane farts, for over 15 years. And I find the more that I learn about it, the less I actually think I know about it. It's just crazy. And I'm sure that you guys probably have a lot of questions. And I would love to be able to answer some of those. Um, but first, I kind of want to just, let's obviously this group, you're here because you want to take some action. And I say, you've already taken the first step. Bravo to you, um, for, being involved, wanting to learn, and wanting to change the world, because that's literally the purpose of what we're doing here. Um, you know, the sayings on the website, never forget that a small group of dedicated individuals can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has, and you're part of that. So bravo to you. Geoengineering, what we see over our house every day, is not new by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, the term geoengineering was first coined back in 1977. I could even go back to the days of John F. Kennedy and reports where geoengineering were first mentioned. You can actually see, if you go to climateviewer.com and you click on timeline, it'll take you to weathermodificationhistory.com, and you can see that wanting to control the weather, these attempts, they started in the mid 1800s, and they've only progressed since. And just this past February, the United Nations published a paper called One Atmosphere. In that paper, they lay out a roadmap, if you will, for global deployment of geoengineering. Now, between that and George Soros talking about funding the creation of clouds over the Arctic to cool the planet, one has to kind of unpack what geoengineering really means these days. So, as with anything that has come to the public's attention, they want to hide it and obscure it through semantics. So, what was once called geoengineering was then rebranded climate climate engineering, because even though Cesare Marchetti in 1977 was specifically calling geoengineering a way of removing CO2 from the atmosphere, which transitioned to what was known as solar radiation management, or a stratospheric aerosol injection, that became geoengineering as well. But geo implies Earth, whereas they want to engineer the climate. So they said, good idea. Let's rename it climate engineering. But then Dr. Alan Robach, while meeting with a bunch of these nerds and PhDs, or as I like to call them, people hiding behind diplomas, they were all sitting in a room deciding what the temperature of the planet should be and how to control it. And Alan remarked that he found it ironic that they were discussing how to control the temperature of the planet, but they were all sweating their butts off because they couldn't control the temperature of the room they were in because the air conditioner was broken. This is a foreboding sign for the entire geoengineering idea, let alone climate engineering. So the word engineering implies human, hands creating something. And as we all know, anybody who's owned a car, engineering go bad. And when engineering go bad, it could cost you your life. Literally, ever have a tire fly off at 70 miles an hour? Well, imagine that on a worldwide scale with our climate. So they wanted to rename it once again climate intervention, as if the earth had a crack habit or was addicted to methamphetamines and needed an intervention, or the fact that we're actually going to intervene in the climate to step in and change what Mother Nature, what God has controlled since the planet was created. So climate intervention is their latest terminology. I even heard one wacko refer to it as climate restoration. But this all stems from the latest push. 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupted. And when the Mount Pinatubo eruption occurred, they noticed that a whole bunch of sulfur got shot into the stratosphere. And as a result of that one volcano and the subsequent drop in global temperature, at the Lawrence Livermore National Labs, Dr. Evil himself, Lowell Wood, along with Edward Teller and Roderick Hyde, started the modern push for geoengineering with the idea of stratospheric aerosol injections using sulfur, spraying sulfur into the stratosphere. They want to mimic volcanoes to block out the sun to cool the planet. So one has to ask yourself, when you're watching these planes crisscross your skies and make cirrus clouds, ice clouds, is that geoengineering? The answer is definitively yes. Chuck Long from the Earth Systems Research Lab at NOAA, one of the most highly regarded atmospheric scientists in the world, said so himself in a paper where he asked about clear sky brightening. And he said specifically that it wasn't even the clouds that you see coming out of planes. It wasn't even the lines that you're seeing in the sky and the clouds they make that's geoengineering, but a subvisual ice haze that whitens the sky. And you have to really think on this one for a moment. So in reality, every plane fart is filled with not only a cloud seed, because cloud seeding is what they do in weather modification. They use silver iodide. Water sticks to the silver iodide. That is what it is, the initial seed that makes the cloud. And eventually, when enough water sticks to that seed, it falls as rain. That's rainfall enhancement. That's the idea of cloud seeding. The same is true of aircraft. Whenever a jet fuel is burnt, out the back of that plane comes carbon black dust and soot. That soot is filled with metals. It is also coated in sulfur. And that sulfur transitions into sulfuric acid. And the Indian Space Organization found that at 18,000 kilometers, there was more than 10,000 specks or cloud seeds that came from planes, black carbon dust, at 18,000 kilometers. And the only source that they could determine that it was possible to come from was planes. So not only are planes flying well below that, that tells us that jet exhaust is transporting sulfur into the stratosphere and is geoengineering, and that it creates an ice haze that whitens the sky. And Chuck Long from the Earth Systems Research Lab said so himself with direct measurements. So what we have today is a combination of cloud creation or artificial clouds, or as the scholars would say, aviation-induced cloudiness, contrail-induced cirrus. They have many terms for what you're seeing, but at the end of the day, it is geoengineering. Both are geoengineering. One, you can look directly above your head, and even on the bluest day, it may be deep blue directly overhead. And then when you look off to the horizon, it'll be milky white. How many people in the room have noticed this? That is what Chuck Long was referring to as clear sky brightening, that That's what geoengineering will look like if the United Nations gets its way, if the globalists and the technocrats are allowed to legalize geoengineering and dump way more chemicals into the stratosphere. It will only get whiter. Your future's so bright, you're gonna need shades. And their artificial shade for the planet will not suffice. So I get a question a lot on my YouTube channel. It's at Climate Viewer on YouTube. I get this in my emails all the time. Jim, I used to see the sun was bright yellow to dark, yellow bordering on orange. It seems white today. Am I crazy? You are not. This is caused by subvisual ice haze that causes diffuse light scattering, that causes all kinds of changes to the way light reaches the surface of the earth. So not only is our sun becoming whiter in appearance, the sky is becoming milky white. We have, a friend of mine wrote a rap song, Digital Clouds, and he called them the sky is full of white snakes and digital clouds. And those white snakes are fanning out in whether they want to call them persistent contrails or whatever term they come up with. At the end of the day, when those lines fan out, they become cirrus clouds. The cirrus clouds are specifically ice clouds. And when Ulrich Lohmann and a group of people from Finland flew up into those ice clouds and captured the cloud seeds, remember the terminology we talked about earlier, when they captured the little morsels, the little nuggets that all the ice had built up on, they found that 75% of those cloud seeds were man-made metals. My firewall's kicking off. Be gone, bad government actors. All right. We shall continue despite their attempts for shenanigans. So at the end of the day, 75% man-made metals found in cirrus clouds, sulfuric acid coming out of planes, making its way into the stratosphere, and the United Nations trying to legalize not only geoengineering experiments, but global deployment and global governance. One has to ask the most obvious question: what is the real purpose here? Is it really because they're so scared of global warming that they want to cool the planet? Do they really want to mimic volcanoes by spraying chemicals to save us from global warming? And I would say resoundingly the answer is no. If you look at the movement of technocracy, which started in the early 1930s, at the heart of every globalist is a technocrat. And a technocrat is one who would seek to have a one world government run by the scientific method, ruled by unelected officials who control all resources on the planet, including the number one resource on the planet, humans. So between human resources, water and food and energy, they want to be able to control it all. And they can do that by spying through every control mechanism possible: mass media, mind control, manipulation, slave speak, through, Joseph Stalin said, ideas are more powerful than guns. We would not let our enemies have guns. Why should we let them have ideas? So in that, you will quickly be referred to as a conspiracy theorist or a chemtard or, one of those chemtrail people if you try to talk about the most visible climate change there is. And that's planes farting all over the sky, changing the weather on a daily basis. And eventually, over the past 60, 70 years, changing the entire climate of the globe. Now, of course, I could go on ad nauseum about all the finer details, but I want to leave you with that broad kind of understanding of specifically just the airline industry. And I'm going to flip it real quick and then open, I would prefer to answer questions than monologue any day. But I want you to just propose this to you. On weathermodificationhistory.com, there are 3 different Freedom of Information Act requests. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and China Lake Naval Warfare Center, both of which were involved in weather warfare in Vietnam. So back in the 1969 through 73, there was Operation Popeye, and both of these institutions, the United States Air Force and the United States Naval Research Lab, in concert with the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and everybody's favorite fun guy, Henry Kissinger, they decided to do weather warfare with the approval of President Lyndon Johnson. And their slogan was "Make mud, not war," kind of a throwback to the hippie movement of the same time, where they said "Make love, not war." Make mud, not war was the idea that they would dump silver iodide and lead iodide into the monsoon rains over Vietnam to make the Ho Chi Minh Trail unpassable, to make the monsoon rains so bad that it would wash out the Viet Cong. And anybody who's seen movies like Forrest Gump or any documentary where you see soldiers up to their waist in water knows what weather warfare looks like. So in 1994, I came across 3 separate Freedom of Information Act requests that were brought by the sunshineproject.org. This website is no longer available on the internet. I do a lot of trolling on archive.org, aka the Wayback Machine, and I look for deleted websites. And in addition to the sunshine-project.org website, I found a presentation by Dr. Arnold J. Barnes from the United States Air Force Phillips Laboratory at Hanscom Air Force Base, who said the same thing. All 3 of these, the Freedom of Information Act request and Dr. Arnold Barnes from the U.S. Air Force Phillips Lab, said, we want to control the weather using carbon black dust. The exact same thing that comes out of commercial aviation, the same stuff. But it gets a little deeper when you look back through our newspaper vault on weather modification history. Back in 1958, Dr. Florence Van Straten, that's correct, it was a lady doctor who worked for the United States Navy. She was able to create and destroy clouds using carbon black dust. 1958. This is by no stretch of the imagination a new technology. She said that they were able to create 1 mile long clouds with carbon black dust suspended in a liquid. They were able to make puffy clouds just by dumping dry carbon black dust out of the back of planes. And they were able to destroy or eliminate those clouds using the same carbon black dust, because that's called overseeding. If there are too many seeds in the sky and not enough water vapor for them to stick to, then you actually can shut rain off. So not only can they create floods, they can create droughts. In those Freedom of Information Act requests and in Dr. Arnold Barnes' presentation, he said, current capabilities, 1997, create/suppress contrails/cirrus. But he told us why. He said the military does it for two purposes. One, to block out spy satellites in space. Think about it. Why would the military create a bunch of clouds? Well, if China or Russia has a spy satellite that's going to be coming over, and you've got your brand new top secret stealth fighter that you want to do some test flights on, or it's going to be out on the runway, you could just make clouds and block the sky out. In fact, back in the 1970s, the Russians were able to create what they called infrared defeating clouds. So not even on an infrared spectrum, not just visual satellites, but even infrared that could like pierce through clouds, that they could create clouds that could block out all spectrums of light, to block out satellites in space. The other reason that he gave for creating clouds was to improve the ability for nighttime operations, like the United States military did in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Desert Storm. When we marched all of our troops in there, it was surprising to most people who were watching the news to see the Iraqi Republican Guard all coming out with their hands up in under 10 days. It's the worst beatdown in the history of warfare. And people had to ask themselves how and why. I mean, were we just that good? But when you think about not only what they called calmatives, the fact that they have all types of bioweapons that they can deploy despite, bioweapons being banned. Look up the gay bomb if you want a really, good laugh and cry at the same time. The idea that they would make a chemical they could spray on the battlefield to make Iraqi soldiers gay. So they're so busy and mad in love with each other that they just throw their weapons down and don't want to fight. It's a real thing. That's what makes it scary and funny at the same time. But they could easily cover the entire country of Iraq in clouds, and in a very black night with A-10 warthogs raining down 30 millimeter shells and dropping bombs, and all of our soldiers geared to the teeth with night vision goggles, those poor Iraqis never stood a chance. All because of clouds and a lot of psychological warfare. There's a lot going on there, but the clouds, they help. When you have night vision goggles and your enemy does not, when it's dark, you just hold your hand out in front of you. You can't see that. You're certainly not going to be able to shoot at the enemy. You're a sitting duck. These are the reasons why the military creates clouds, in addition to John Brennan from the CIA. Oh, there he goes again. It's the CIA and weather warfare in Vietnam. It's the CIA trying to kill Castro's crops because they didn't like Fidel Castro. So they made the rain fall in the Gulf of Mexico, not on the country of Cuba. That is a man-made created drought using cloud seeding. In Vietnam, they made floods. In Cuba in 1969, they made drought. And the idea was that if they killed Castro's sugar crops, they would kill his money. Economic warfare through weather warfare, brought to you by the CIA. So is it any surprise that today, John Brennan, when he was in charge of the CIA, was talking at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he said, "It has come to my attention that geoengineering is a pretty badass idea, and we'd like to do it." So you're not a conspiracy theorist, and those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. I would strongly advocate for action against the airline industry, specifically commercial aviation, and the pollution that comes from jet fuel being burned that creates clouds that alter our weather and climate and transport sulfur into the stratosphere. That's a big problem. and simultaneously recognizing that military and government agencies also intentionally create clouds, have stated why they do it, and have said, we're very concerned about climate change due to destabilization. At the same time, many journals and many online, websites have said that because of the weather warfare ban of 1978 that followed Vietnam and the disclosure of the weather warfare that happened there, this was called the Environmental Modification Convention. It was signed ratified in 1978. Russia and China were the heads of the signatories, and they agreed to not do weather warfare. However, there is no way to actually catch somebody doing weather warfare, which is why I've proposed something called the Environmental Modification Accountability Act. And it's an addendum, an add-on, a way to trust but verify, to give teeth to the weather warfare ban of 1978, to create a sensor network worldwide, one run by the government and militaries, and one run by the people. That's right. I hope to one day build a climate viewer for your own backyard to collect rainfall samples, to be able to monitor for the telltale signatures, chemicals that are used in weather modification. And when we find them in your rain, you'll know that something has happened. But it's going to take a monumental effort to push back against military and government institutions that are dedicated to weather warfare, weather control, and ultimately climate engineering, climate intervention, or geoengineering. Because when the United States military did the zinc cadmium sulfide spraying of 1950s, and they were simulating nuclear fallout by spraying zinc cadmium sulfide from planes all the way from California to Washington, D.C., from coast to coast, Operation Large Area Coverage. You can look this stuff up. It's the Manhattan-Rochester Coalition, as it was known. They did well over 1,000 different sprayings of radioactive material and followed people for more than 40 and 50 years to their death. And when they died, they got their thyroids and ground them up to find out how much of that radioactive dust was in their thyroids. This was a secret for over 70 years. I want that to sink in. So while you're thinking about, how do I get the damn military and how do I put an end to all this? They were able to keep something on that monumental of a scale secret for over 70 years. I will not be surprised at the age of 46 right now that on my deathbed, I'm going to have some young kid who, followed my work, or, get an email from a friend of a friend who's going to be like, hey, the government just admitted that they started geoengineering back in 2008 and they've been doing it ever since. And like, son of a bitch, I knew I was right. But that's the world we live in. That's the reality we face. So what I tell people who are pragmatic and they want a solution, act on what you know now. And what we know, we prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that the airline industry is geoengineering. Whether it's intentional or not, I would lean way more towards intentional at this point. Maybe not over the last 40 years, but certainly within the last 20. And you can read all the documentation you want about it. I tend to just throw it all into the artificial clouds section of my website. I think it's the most accurate term for it. And you'll see things like I interviewed the Dr. Rangasai Halthori from the Federal Aviation Administration, Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative. Oh, it's a mouthful and a tongue twister. But he's the head of all things aviation and climate change. And he said, we want more clouds by day, none by night. You can't get much clearer than that. When the head of the Federal Aviation Administration says, hey, we know you guys don't like us making clouds, but guess what? We want more clouds. We just don't want them at nighttime because they heat the planet like a blanket. They are the greenhouse. We want to melt them away at night, but we want more clouds during the day. So screw all you guys who say you don't want them. And if you use the C word, we're going to use the C word back at you. You say chemtrail, we'll say conspiracy theorist. But it's not a conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy fact. And with that, I'll gladly take any questions.
Is there anybody? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for now.
I figured I would change it up, Bettina, instead of just monologuing about my solution. Try to mix some other stuff in there.
Come on up here because Jim is going to hear you through the mic here. Yeah.
I just wanted to know if there was any known connections between the 5G towers and nanoparticles and any sort of communication that may also be an assist through using it as a communication thing as well as with metallics and whatnot.
So this is there are a lot of commonalities between radio transmission and aerosols. In fact, I've read many papers on things like RFID chips. I'll give an example just to make this simpler. In an Amazon warehouse, if they were to fill the warehouse with metallic particles, that the RFID chips that are on all of the inventory in the building that then could more easily communicate over long distances and talk to each other and basically keep literally somebody is sitting there at a monitoring board, and instead of paying somebody to actually have to go up and scan everything, that they could all report simultaneously through the air. So it's true that putting metallic particles in the air does increase conductivity, does increase radio reception. The problem with this theory, almost all radio transmission, especially like military, and even your FM radio, broadcast television, DTV, that sort of stuff, those signals bounce off the ionosphere. So if planes were, dumping, which they are dumping metallic particles, don't get me wrong. I've got an entire periodic table of, what metals are in the cloud seeds, the soot coming out of the planes. And it's all the usual suspects, all the ones you've heard of, and then a few more, molybdenum, zirconium, vanadium, aluminum, barium, calcium. Calcium's probably the biggest one. Most people know nothing about that. But you name a metal and it's pretty much guaranteed to be in there, because guess what? It was already in the jet fuel to begin with. And once that is burned, it comes out in nanoparticle form and it spreads all over. I'm trying to self-censor and not curse because I get really heated when I talk about this. But it's all over the planet. So yes, there are metals coming out of planes. But back to my point that radio frequencies that they want to travel over a long distance, they have to bounce off the ionosphere. So if they put too many particles into the sky, they would actually interrupt the ability for long range, discussions over encrypted signals bounced off the ionosphere. Your ham radio operators would be the first people to notice, to be quite honest with you. They're pretty accurate little boogers. I have a whole HARP detection network of ham radio operators that are like, yo, Jim, HARP's on. Got it right now. Sending me recordings, 2.8 to 10 megahertz. They know the second it's turned on. They know the signature. So yeah, I mean, there's so many eyes and ears on the sky. I don't think that they could get away with, just about anything electromagnetic wise that would not be noticed. Now, you said with the 5G towers. Now, we have to think about this more rationally, because in reality, as you go up in frequency, you actually shorten the distance at which it's available and reliable. So 5G tends to be in like the 60 gigahertz, that's 60 billion hertz range, which means that, and I mean, this is really going to sound weird and it's controversial, but it's actually less dangerous than 4G, because 4G is, more around the kilohertz and megahertz. Well, let's say megahertz, because most of the kilohertz ones are pretty much out of function. We're talking, in the megahertz, millions of hertz. The lower you go in frequency, the more deeply it penetrates human tissue. Okay. So at 60 gigahertz, if you're more than 100 feet away from that tower, more than 1,000 feet away from that tower, it cannot penetrate your skin. So it's kind of one of those catch 22s, when talking to people in the public about this, because while I understand, that I don't like, I am personally electromagnetically sensitive. Okay. So I don't do Wi-Fi in my house. I throw a bitch fit with my wife and kids whenever they want to turn it on. If I'm going to take a nap, even for an hour and a half, I'm like, Wi-Fi off, cell phones off, daddy's taking a nap. So don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you have to understand that weapons systems and directed energy technology, like the active denial system, they use the same frequency, LRAD, long range acoustic hailing devices. All of these technologies use frequencies that are very similar to 5G. They're in the same range. And the thing they have in common is that they don't penetrate the more than a quarter inch of the skin. It depends on the range, of course, though. If you're close to the source of any electromagnetic radiation, whether it's a Doppler radar, any kind of electromagnetic radiation, the closer you get to the source, the higher the power density, the more likely it is to cause long-lasting damage. But as you go up in frequency, especially with 5G, and even the riot control directed energy weapons, if you're far enough away from it, the most you're going to feel is a tingle. You're going to feel like you're being electrically zapped. It will cause no long-term damage. But of course, it attacks the balls, as we like to call them, the eyeballs, the gonads, because they're fluid filled. So you're going to get, at worst case scenario, you could suffer from cancer. You could, have permanent damage to your eyes, reproductive harm, things like that. Best case scenario, you feel a little bit of static tingle. It feels like needles on your skin, and you get the hell out of the way when you're talking about the military weapons. But with 5G, the thing about 5G is that it is very short range and distance, and it's highly unlikely to even be able to make it through your walls unless you live in a area that is densely populated with transmitters. So if you live in a big city where they've rolled out 5G and they've got hundreds, if not thousands of 5G towers, be worried. Yeah. If you live in a city like I do, 70,000 people, I've got a 5G phone, and guess what? I almost never get a 5G signal because we have trees. And as stupid as it sounds, 4G will travel right through those trees just fine, but a tree can block a 5G signal. I hope that kind of answers your question. You have any follow up or anything?
But one thing I wanted to comment on, you said something about calcium. See, I always associate the chemtrails, I think aluminum oxide, and I looked up the chemicals, but I'm not really sure of the exact breakdown. But you did mention calcium.
Did you hear that, Jim?
No, it was breaking up. I got my volume all the way up too. It's just too.
You had mentioned something about calcium, like calcium was quite a significant factor with the chemicals that are coming out and
yeah.
general. But something interesting, I had an environmental study done on a vacant lot in my town of Lumbee. And so I was comparing what an average, what they expected, which ones were considered heavy contamination. The calcium content in my soil was through the roof. I didn't really think too much of it, but I thought, wow, like thousands. I'm talking thousands of times more.
That's expected. That's to be expected. Yeah, that's why, because that's what people. One of my biggest problems was that for years I had a certain belief about chemtrails. And then as I started to really zero in on what the problem was and where it was coming from was the jet fuel, I found out about something called the NATO single fuel concept. So you know about NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the member nations that all agree to, get each other's back whenever something goes down. They're in a gang, and Putin's not. Anyway. In 1988, they started the single fuel concept. They wanted to switch from gasoline-based jet fuel to kerosene-based jet fuel. And the gasoline-based jet fuel, there was around 9,000 parts per billion. I want to be accurate about this. Just give me 1 second, because I'm going to actually bring the numbers up real quick. It's at climateviewer.com/cirrus clouds matter. If anybody wants to play along at home, you can bookmark that. Climateviewer.com/cirrus clouds matter. And our cirrus clouds filled with metals. I'm going to scroll to that. And okay, I was off by a lot. In JP5, it was 5,000 parts per billion of calcium. And when they switched to JP8, which is the kerosene-based fuel, 31,000 parts per billion. Aluminum went from 2,000 to 9,300 parts per billion. Magnesium went from 1,000 to 5,800 parts per billion. Strontium from 70 to 351 parts per billion. Sulfur from 450 to 1,600. Titanium from only 35 to 1,000 parts per billion. So what you see all the way down the board, and this comes straight from a military analysis, trace element of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon analysis of jet engine fuels, Jet A, JP5, and JP8. Coincidentally, I wanted to trace the origins of the word chemtrails because I'm very big on ontology and etymology, because that is the tool of mind control, of the day. So I wanted to know, who was the first person to ever say the word chemtrail, and what the hell were they talking about? Well, I found it in 1997, the very first article that ever used the word chemtrail. And do you know what that article was about? JP8 jet fuel. It is not a coincidence. So the single fuel concept started in 1988. It was completed in 1996. They converted every single plane worldwide from JP5, from gasoline to kerosene. Coincidentally, my father-in-law was a 30-year chief master sergeant whose his specialty was jet engine fuel systems. Upon determining that I had found the root cause of all the clouds and the yuck we're seeing in the sky, I called him and I said, "Hey, Sam, could you tell me about, do you remember that time they switched from gasoline to the," and I thought it was diesel at the time, it was kerosene, but regardless, we're splitting hairs. I said, "You remember when you switched from gasoline to diesel and all the jets? How'd that work out for you?" And he just turns to me with the most crap eating grin. And he's like, "That was the biggest cluster F in the history of my career. Our engines were coated in black soot." So not only did we get the plethora of additional metals coming out of the back of all military planes worldwide, coinciding with the first use of the word chemtrails, coinciding with the uptick in the amount of clouds that are going on a worldwide basis. Everybody asks, how could this just simultaneously happen all over the world, all at once? I remember blue skies. Hell, I said it. I was a Boy Scout. I was outside every day. I think I knew what my sky looked like. I'm only 46. I was born in 1976. Well, it turns out when NATO decides to change its fuel in all of its military jets, which put out way more pollution than the commercial, aviation, suddenly we got a worldwide problem. And it all comes down to something called the NATO Pipeline Committee, which, as far as I could tell, is less than 15 people. Their names are not made public. And they even have a special assignments division of the NATO Pipeline Committee, which could actually be the people who said, if we switch this jet fuel, we would increase the amount of sulfur, aluminum, calcium, iron, lead, magnesium, manganese, nickel, niobium, potassium, scandium, selenium, strontium, sulfur, tin, titanium, vanadium, zirconium, all of that, all those metals would go up exponentially, and we could geoengineer the whole damn planet. And that's exactly what happened. So everybody, when I first started doing this, and by everybody, I mean every single talking head on YouTube who had a chemtrail website, all the talking heads, all they ever said was aluminum and barium, aluminum and barium, aluminum and barium. And I'm like, well, it's true. JP5, 9 parts per billion aluminum or barium. JP8, 38 parts per billion barium. But what about going from 5,000 to 31,000 parts per billion, which is 31 parts per million for those who don't like math, or that's a lot. So yes, you're going to see way more calcium build up in the atmosphere, in your water, in your soil. A sign of high calcium could definitely be attributed to military aviation flying in your area, as opposed to Jet A, which is what most commercial flights, 555 parts per billion. 555 parts per billion Jet A, 5,256 JP5 gasoline, 31,120 in JP8.
Excessive amounts of calcium have been connected with iron deficiencies in humans as well. So I'm thinking that a lot of people are talking about iron deficiency, their bodies aren't absorbing it. Perhaps to do with an overabundance.
Yeah, but here the thing is, the entire chemtrail conspiracy boils down to a single word: intent. So there are those who would say it's about global depopulation, Jim. Why won't you just say it? And I'm going to go, because I haven't been able to find Dr. Evil's sheet of paper saying my plan was to kill all of you. I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic. Do you think that I'm going to get anywhere? Do you think you're going to get anywhere going to your local MP? That's what you guys call them, right? You got your representatives, MPs. Am I right on that one?
MLAs, MPs.
Okay. So yeah, if I go to my local congressman or representative and I go up to him and I say, you know, the global cabal of NATO guys are turning the frogs gay and they're trying to kill us all with all the engineered nanoparticles like calcium and barium coming out of the planes. They're going to look at me like I'm Alex Jones. They're going to look at me like I'm a retard, and they're going to send me packing. But if I come up there with scientific peer-reviewed journals and all of the proof necessary to go, look, I'm not the one saying this. Here's the military saying it. Here's 15 different universities saying it. And look right there, you can see it. That's what they're talking about. And that is filled with this, and this is a problem. When I talk to scientists, I call them contrail-induced cirrus clouds. When I talk to the public, you will typically call them chemtrails, but I like calling them plane farts because I'm a redneck. So you have to understand that in a world where perception is reality, where people's perception of you, they're going to judge you immediately by the words you choose. Walking into a government institution where you want to make changes, you want to get laws passed, or you want to actually do something about this, coming in saying, you're evil. I know you're trying to kill everybody on the planet. There's a secret program to geoengineer the planet. You're going to fail on all three of those because you cannot prove them in a court of law. I could walk into any court of law, and with the best attorneys and the brightest, most educated PhDs on the planet who specialize in the subject of atmospheric sciences, jet, engine studies, weather modification, you name it. You fill the room with those fools, and I will happily spank their red piney butt cheeks in public all day, air day, twice on Sunday, because I can literally quote you Ulrich Schumann, German DLR. He said he wants more cooling contrails, less warming contrails, predictable for operational planning. He said this in 2010 at the ICAO Colloquium on Aviation Climate Change. And he also invented the COSIP program, Contrail Cirrus Prediction Tool, which is built into the Aviation Environmental Design Toolkit, which is part of the Next Gen Transportation System, which is the supercomputer that routes every plane on the planet. And in Europe, it's called Eurocontrol. Both run the same type of software, Aviation Environment Design Toolkit. How much fuel do you burn? Where do you burn it at? What impacts that will have on climate, on noise, stupid as that sounds. But when you're seeing these crisscrossing grids in the sky, it's because there aren't pilots literally up there just willy-nilly flying around. They take off and then they press a button, and then the computer back at the head of the Federal Aviation Administration, Next Gen Transportation System, puts them on a highway in the sky. So you get line, wind, line, wind, line, wind. And they're all traveling in the exact same spot. In fact, if you want to do your own test on a busy day, you can bring up a flight tracker and you can hold your finger in the sky. And if you hold your finger right there, you can wait 5 minutes and another plane will touch the tip of your finger. That's how you get these evenly spaced grids, because they're evenly spaced out by a computer. And all of this is, it's by design. That's why they call it the Aviation Environmental Design Toolkit, AEDT. The deeper you dig in this, the more shenanigans you're going to find. But the purpose of the reason why I nerd out on this is because I love a good argument and I love winning. All I do is win, 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 no matter what. And I want you to be able to win as well. And you just have to change your perception of how you convey your perception of this to the individual you're talking to. So for you guys, it's geoengineering. For another group, they're going to be real concerned about chemtrails and everybody on the planet dying. And I'm going to have to switch my whole game up and say, all right, let me try to get you to understand it the way I understand it. And somewhere we'll meet in the middle. When I talked to Dr. Rangasai Halthori, I said contrail-induced cirrus clouds. He was like, holy crap, I'm not going to be able to play the tinfoil hat game with this guy. I'm going to have to actually talk about science today. We ended up having 3 separate interviews. He thoroughly enjoyed them. And then he went and put his foot in his mouth and said, we want to make clouds by day, done by night. So if you can beat them at the word game, you can get them talking. You can at least get the dialogue going. And that's what I want to leave you with on that one.
Is there anybody else with a question? Come on up here, please.
So I just want to know who's putting all these additives into this diesel then, or whatever your planes are flying. So obviously it's not the airlines. Is it already? Who does that? Is the
that again goes back to NATO. The NATO Pipeline Committee also determines what additives are required by law in all military flights, in addition to
it's
the commercial. Commercial aviation actually tends to follow some of the guidelines. They're called STANAGs, STANAG. These STANAGs that are put out by the NATO Pipeline Committee determine, and of course the FAA, International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, they put out what they consider standards, and one of which is like anti-static dissipator. So for an anti-static dissipator, it's called a DINSA, or it's status 450, STADIS 450. This is a dinonyl naphthol sulfonic acid. You got it right.
So
I got it.
What's all this got to be in there? Like, why do they have to have all these additives? I thought.
So for the they had that. Of course, they got reason. They've got reasons for everything, and whether you agree with it or not, the reason stated for putting a static dissipator in there, which is dinonyl naphthol sulfonic acid, which is a barium salt. Surprise, surprise. This barium salt mixture is supposedly during Vietnam, the Viet Cong were able to shoot their AK-47s at the wings of RF-4 Phantoms. And because of the low flash point of gasoline, the planes would burst into flames. In addition to that, people who would go to refuel the planes would end up burning to death because the slightest spark that would jump from the fuel line to the plane could cause the plane to explode and all the people refueling it to die. Similarly, this happened in commercial aviation. So that gave birth to DuPont. I made a timeline thing of all these additives. I got it on my website somewhere. But anyway, DuPont came out with the first version of it. Eventually, the entire aviation industry and military, they settled on status 450 as the preferred anti-static agent because jet engine sparks, because safety issues. That's why they say they put that in there, but that's not all they put in there. They put biocides in there, one of which is called BioBor. It actually, because the wings of a plane are dark, damp, and warm. They're cold, obviously, when they get up in the air, but dark and damp, things grow in there. So little gremlins, little bugs growing inside the fuel tanks, they have an additive for that to kill the bugs inside the gas tank. They have an additive for a de-icing agent. They have other ones for Tracer A, which is like a fuel leak detection system. And it literally is what it sounds like. You know, you put this additive in there, and if there's any line in the plane that has the slightest microfracture, it'll have let's just say a white foamy look to it. So it's a dye that they can find cracks in the fuel systems. I've never worked in the airline industry. I swear I'm not shilling for them. I just literally, I've pulled apart every kind of diagram to every single major airline. You know, like the Dreamliner. I knew every part of the Dreamliner before the first one took flight because I'm constantly looking for where they're going to hide the chemtrails. And it always goes back to the fuel tank. But yeah, there are many different, I have an entire chart. It came from Chevron of all people that lists every single fuel additive and every single fuel type, when it's mandatory, when it's optional, and when they can choose. But one of the creepiest ones is something called a HITS additive. It's HITTS, high thermal stability additive. It's also known as a plus 100 additive. This is a triple cocktail of additives so that planes can fly higher without their fuel lines freezing up. So one of which is called Spec Aid 8Q462. I haven't said that in like 2 years. I love a good question, man. And I love it when I remember this crap. But in Spec Aid 8Q462, they literally have, I was trying to pull material safety data sheets on all these things because I want to know what's in it. You know what I mean? And when I'm looking at this one, I keep seeing a pattern with a lot of these military additives. Such and such, it'll say sulfur, 50%. And what do we say about geoengineering? Sulfur, right? Additive, it's a sulfur additive. Of course, it's a sulfur additive. Ingredient number 2, trade secret ingredient. Ingredient number 3, trade secret ingredient. So when you go to the material safety data sheets for a lot of these fuel additives, you'll see the same thing over and over again. You'll see trade secret ingredient. And when you go to environmental impact, no studies have been done. That should be concerning for everybody. Any other questions about fuel additives? Because
we have 2 more questions coming up. I think you were first, or you? Okay, come on in.
I just have a simple question. 2 additives, Morgellon and graphene oxide.
Morgellons, as a friend of Alana Freeland, and I know that she is good friends with Clifford Carnicom. I have always disagreed with them on Morgellons. And that's simply because I have a different take on Morgellons. It is my personal opinion, and it's backed up by science. And I've had firsthand accounts from a Morgellons patient, survivor, activist who has done, he's done as much research on Morgellons as I have on the topics of geoengineering and chemtrails and all this sort of stuff. So I wanted to kind of, get a second opinion. And what he said resonated with me because it was what I had already believed to be true. And that is that in 1991, there was Hurricane Bob hit Plum Island where they do the animal testing. And during that, there was a laboratory leak. And during that laboratory leak, it is my belief that Morgellons was leaked from that lab. It was first traveled through mosquitoes. It made its way to ticks, and it is a form of Lyme disease. When I was last on the phone with Morlana, when I was last on the phone with Alana Freeland, I told her this about this lab leak, theory. And she said, no, wait, I was talking with Clifford Carnicom about Morgellons. There's definitely a link between Lyme disease and Morgellons. So that's like the fifth, confirmation that I've gotten. And he's supposedly the expert on this. He's also the number one purveyor of the theory that they come from planes and that it's, an engineered bioweapon that's spraying from planes. And my only question would be, what would be the motivation and how do the technocrat, Illuminati, globalist, bastards not get Morgellons themselves? What do they got? An immunity shot? Do they drink baby's blood and that just magically keeps them from getting Morgellons? I don't know. But I've never been able to find any evidence linking whether it's jet fuel or direct spray units. The only direct spray units that I've ever been able to really track down, are either fire suppression systems. There's obviously the aerial spray unit out of Youngstown. They do things like spraying adulticide, where they spray for mosquitoes. Happened during Hurricane Katrina. They were out there flying C-130s. They got pumps and pipes, everything that you see in every chemtrail video. And they spray, chemicals to kill mosquitoes. They also still do defoliants, just like Agent Orange back in the day. The aerial spray units, they spray that sort of stuff. I have never seen a single document, even though I did mention the gay bomb earlier, about Morgellons, or anything similar to it. But in my own personal research, I tend to lean towards laboratory leak, and I'm going to stick to that because there's a definite link between Lyme disease, and Morgellons, and Lyme disease and Plum Island. What was the second part of your question again? Graphene oxide. So graphene is a different story. Not only I'm gonna kill two birds with one stone on this because they're both the same idea. So graphene and aluminum nanoparticles, both of which have been proposed, and I cannot confirm whether they have been implemented, but both of which I've read multiple peer-reviewed journal studies on engine performance enhancement and fuel economy in aviation from adding nanoparticles of aluminum and graphene to jet fuel. And I could pretty much just stop right there, but I'll read. I happen to have it up on the screen, so I might as well read it to you. Why add nanoparticles? The idea, says lead author J.R.B. Anand, an associate professor, blah, blah, blah. Let's skip all that, from India. In the study had an average diameter of 51 billionths of a meter. They have more reactive surfaces, allowing them to act as a efficient chemical catalyst, increasing fuel combustion. The presence of particles also increases fuel air mixing in the fuel and leads to more complete burning. In the study, Anand and co-author J. Sadiq Basha first used a mechanical agitator to create an emulsion consisting of J-tropha biodiesel. I never even mentioned biofuels for contrail control, but that's a big thing. If you're taking notes, if you want to do some homework later on, look up biofuels, BIO, biofuel for contrail control. Mind-blowing topic. But the J-tropha plant they're talking about here is a biofuel, or what they call alternative aviation fuel. It's a way for them to control clouds. Anyway, J-tropha biodiesel, a fuel derived from the crushed seeds of the J-tropha plant, water, a surfactant. A surfactant is a cleaning agent, is a fuel additive. You just mentioned that was the previous question. Surfactant is another one of the categories of fuel additives. Then blended in different proportions with aluminum nanoparticles. So whether it's graphene oxide or it's aluminum, they want to add nanoparticles of this to the jet fuel. It says, in addition to outperforming regular biofuel, the nanoparticle spiked fuels produce significantly lower quantities of nitrogen oxide and carbon monoxide gases and create less smoke. The researchers are now testing out other types of nanoparticles, including hollow carbon nanotubes, graphene, and investigating the effects of nano additives to engine lubrication and cooling systems. One obstacle to the application of this kind of nanotechnology is the high cost of nanoparticle production, says Anand, who also cautions nanoparticles, quote, should be used judiciously because they tend to, quote, entrain in human bodies, end quote. This is from a study called Nanoparticles Increase Biofuel Performance. I have a whole bunch of other ones too, but I won't bore you with that.
Okay, we have one more question. Come on up here, please.
And I'm gonna kind of change our line of thought here a little bit. The upper atmosphere, where all this stuff is going, if we get an EMP burst from the sun, will it help slow that down or modify it before it hits the earth? And why didn't you use a Faraday cage to help yourselves?
Great question. So the biggest threat we currently face is high altitude electromagnetic pulse, either from a coronal mass ejection from the sun, something similar to the Carrington event, or a high altitude electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear bomb. Most people don't understand that nuclear bombs are actually more dangerous if they don't land on your town, like Hiroshima or Fukushima and Nagasaki. I went to Fukushima, of course. Anyway, so Kim Jong-un, Rocket Man, North Korea, he doesn't actually have to hit the United States to literally destroy it. If he launched a rocket and it was, let's say, 100,000 kilometers above Canada, that electromagnetic pulse would destroy and cripple the entire country. In America, one centered over, let's say, Kansas at about the same height would take out all of the power, all of the internet, all of the water, all of the everything. And it would take months, if not years, to replace. The Heritage Foundation found that if a high altitude electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear detonation or a Carrington event size solar flare coronal mass ejection were to occur today, 2/3 of Americans would die within 6 months. 2/3 of Americans would die. So that's 330 million. That's 220 million dead in 6 months due to starvation, obviously, among other things. You know, everybody in the hospital, you're dead. All the planes would fall out of the sky. There would be no phones. There would be no, supply chains. It would literally be Civil War meets The Walking Dead, minus the zombies. They're working on the zombies. But to get more serious, the question you ask about, would the metal particles in the sky help to alleviate that problem? The answer is they would actually make it worse. So we're gonna flip the script here for a moment, and I know this seems kind of completely unrelated, but how many people have heard of HARP?
Yeah.
All of us.
everybody in the room, I'm sure. So the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program in Gacona, Alaska, when they were trying to get the funding to build it, Dennis Papadopoulos from the University of Maryland attended something called the Tether Panel at the Eisenhower Institute. And at the Tether Panel, they were specifically talking about this exact threat that we're talking about right now. So let me hop over there because I just want to read you one thing real quick because this is just absolutely priceless. Not do ionospheric heaters affect your brain? All right, here we go. So this was right here. Satellite threat due to high altitude nuclear detonation, Eisenhower Institute Tether Panel. Tether Panel recommendation: use HARP facility in Alaska as a wind tunnel to determine the feasibility and engineering specifications of a mitigation system for high altitude electromagnetic pulse. So one of the things that HARP can do is create artificial aurora. It does this through the process of using shear Alvin waves, basically electromagnetic missiles. It fires its signals in a very precise way, in a pulsed way, that they travel along the Van Allen belts. And they actually can hop from pole to pole. So when it leaves Alaska and it goes all the way down to Australia, which is called the conjugate point, all the way it's pushing and collecting electrons. And then when it gets to the pole, it dumps all those electrons. This is called radiation precipitation. That creates artificial aurora. So what happens naturally is the sun's rays hit our ionosphere because of the magnetic field lines of the Van Allen belts. They travel to the poles. They make the aurora borealis and the aurora australis. HARP, one of the ideas that was, originally proposed was that through firing chemicals from sounding rockets, not from planes, all the way out in space in the mesosphere. We're talking 300,000 kilometers. Okay. 300, anywhere from 150 to 500,000 kilometers. That's the general area of that they like to target for that. So HARP could fire signals into the Van Allen belts, scrape out radiation, dump it on the poles, and act as a short circuit for an HEMP event or a coronal mass ejection. Now, it's been found since the original proposals. Yes, they can create artificial aurora, but they would need a much bigger transmitter to pull it off. And that's why they have moved on to what's called EISCAT 3D. What did I say? I said 150 to 300 kilometers, not 100,000. Good Lord, man. Woo, I was off. This is 3 zeros, bro. I've been coding. I'm combining all three of my websites into one. So I've been coding nonstop for the last 3 or 4 months. So climateviewer.com will be the final resting place for weathermodificationhistory.com and my maps from climateviewer.org. I'm, sometimes I'm a little scatterbrained because I'm trying to, it's 15 years of work trying to put it all into one place and make it make sense is a feat. I don't even know I'm going to be able to pull it off. Anyway, so just to clarify, 150 to 300 kilometers, that's the prime area of, HARP's operations. So they have proposed the idea of scraping radiation. It's called radiation belt remediation, but they need way more power to do this. So instead of in Alaska, which of course, if you guys know what's happened, transpired since, the United States Naval Research Lab and the U.S. Air Force Research Lab sold the HARP facility to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Only 3/4 of the array is currently operational. They took a lot of the stuff with them when the military left. So the magnetometer that we used to watch online during the Fukushima earthquake, when we could actually tell just from their website when it was on or off, because you'd see the 2.5 hertz signal. They took all those toys with them, and they left it in disarray. But I've actually spoken with Chris Fallon, who's the director of HARP, about 7 times on his cell phone. To ask him questions. I did a PowerPoint presentation on HARP, and I was like, "Hey, look at this, Chris. Tell me how accurate I am." He's like, "I agree with everything but the last page." And of course, the last page is the one where I said, "Did HARP cause the Fukushima earthquake?" So of course, we agreed to disagree on that one. But regardless, he actually was doing some of these experiments on creating artificial aurora. The effect is very weak. Essentially, the answer to the question is no. Sprinkling chemicals in the troposphere, in the stratosphere, even the mesosphere would not matter. So we're talking troposphere up to about 12 kilometers, stratosphere up to about 50 kilometers, the mesosphere, which is, technically right at the border of the ionosphere, 85 kilometers, and then the thermosphere, ionosphere, that's where they would actually dump the metal chemicals if they were to try to prevent this sort of thing. They do this with Black Brant sounding rockets, among other types of, they're called sounding rockets. These rockets actually dump trimethyl aluminum, barium, strontium, cesium-137. They also have satellites that do the same thing. So between sounding rockets and satellites, they work in concert with ground-based microwave transmitters like HARP. They decided that Bernard Eastland, one of the originators of the idea of the artificial ionospheric mirror and a lot of the technology behind HARP, he used to work for ARCO. He actually said in order to achieve global worldwide, weather control, we would need 100 billion watts of power and a facility much, much larger than HARP. HARP is 3.6 million watts with an effective radiated power of 5 billion watts or gigawatts. I like to say gigawatts, but I watched Back to the Future and he was like 1.21 gigawatts. Does anybody remember that? From back to the Future? That's a lightning bolt. So we all have we're all on the same page here. 1.21 gigawatts is a lightning bolt. HARP is like 4 lightning bolts worth of power. That's a lot of power, but it pales in comparison to our sun. So to overcome the power of the sun, you would need about 100 billion watts or 100 gigawatts. And it just so happens that in Tromsø, Norway, at the Tromsø array, which is currently operating at 1.2 million watts, they're upgrading the Tromsø array, which is an ionospheric heater, to what they call EISCAT 3D. It's EISCAT 3D. And their goal is to make a ionospheric heater with a power output of 100 billion watts. So is their purpose to save us from a coronal mass ejection? Is it to save us from a high altitude electromagnetic pulse by doing radiation belt remediation? Or is it literally like one of these idiots I heard from MIT University say to just outright destroy the Van Allen belts because we don't really need them. You can't make up some of the crazy stuff these people say. But the final question is it because they want to be able to steer the jet stream? And as Bernard Eastland said, it would take 100 billion watts to do it. So to answer your question, no, sprinkling chemicals near the ground, relatively near the ground, stratosphere, troposphere, where we breathe our air. No, it wouldn't. I mean, it'd literally be dust in the wind. The electromagnetic power of a coronal mass ejection on the level of the Carrington event the wires going down your street would catch fire. During the Carrington event, the aurora borealis, or the northern lights, were visible in Florida, United States. That's how big and powerful it was. At the time, they had telegraphs, and the telegraph wires caught on fire. Other telegraphs began tapping rapidly by themselves, which really freaked people out. But they didn't live in a world that is digitally controlled and everything has a power line or power wire hooked to it. Building yourself a Faraday cage, you need one hellified fortress of a Faraday cage all the way around your house, and you're still going to die. I mean, unless you have, and I mean, it's possible, but my friend lives in Canada and I know what kind of hell he went through to get a hunting rifle. But you guys don't have 30 AR-15s and around 200,000 rounds of ammunition like my brother does. So good luck. I mean, at least you got plenty of moose and bear. So you got that going for you. But no, it would be the scariest part for me is that in this scenario, if we lose power to our nuclear power plants, they will all melt down just like Fukushima. And that very well could be the end of all of us. So, of all the things I've studied in my 15 plus years, if you want to count the 10 years before that, I was a hacker. And that's when I actually wrote my first blog post, Alone in the Dark. I had a nightmare about this after I read about what could happen in this event. I immediately thought to myself, well, damn, every nuclear reactor on the planet could simultaneously melt down. Because if you don't have power to the water pumps to cool the reactor melts down. And that's exactly what would happen if we had either a high altitude electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear bomb or a coronal mass ejection like the Carrington event. Every single reactor facing the sun that day would immediately be, melting down and radiation pouring out of it and poisoning everything. The entire northern hemisphere is gone. So there's that. God, that's a real bummer to end on. Somebody else needs to ask something.
On a lighter note,
We have one final question
Yeah,
right here.
just a comment. When I've traveled I live in Alberta and British Columbia, and I see chemtrails profuse. I mean, they're all over the place.
Mhm.
When I've been on the Caribbean side of Mexico and in Costa Rica on the west side, on the Pacific side, I don't see any visually. I don't have any anecdotal, proof of them there. And why is that?
I talked to a guy named Ian McDonald who said the exact same thing. Your name's not Ian, is it?
Not today.
Okay, good. Yeah, when I was talking to Ian about this, it's funny because it's hyper localized. In fact, I live in Sumter, South Carolina, and I tell it, it's funny and not, but I've been telling people for years, I'm like, though I follow this very carefully, though I actually went to Washington, D.C., and I spoke at an EPA hearing that I was the reason it even happened on pollution coming from airplanes. It was broadcast on C-SPAN. You could see me testifying in front of the EPA on this topic. In my hometown, it's really not that bad. We mostly have blue skies. I rarely see any chemtrails. It's very rare. And then just recently, back in September, I took a job as a security guard over in the neighboring county. It's literally a 25-minute drive. So, I mean, we're talking less than 20 miles away. And it's straight alley. The entire sky, every single day. Very rare that I don't see it. So if it can be that that different in only 20 miles, I mean, that's a pretty significant, departure from what my norm is in Sumter versus Manning. So yeah, it's hyper localized because, like I said earlier, there are highways in the sky. And you have to think about, especially when you were talking about Alberta, there's a huge highway that they'd prefer not to fly over the ocean. So they fly up the coast heading to Alaska and then over from Anchorage over to Asia and then down to Japan, things like that. There's a lot of that. So the entire East Coast of North America and West Coast, they have highways. The entire southern border of the United States has another major highway where, literally tens of thousands of flights per day, come through. I think that the reason why I don't see it as much where I live is because we have Shaw Air Force Base here. And Shaw Air Force Base being one of the top fighter deployment bases on the East Coast of the United States, they also have a huge bombing range. So I'm pretty sure that what's actually going on is I live downwind of those two places, and they route the flights around it because they don't want them flying over a military base. So something as stupid as the fact that I live downwind from a military base that's in my hometown, I don't see chemtrails. Riddle me this, but then I go 20 miles away and they're everywhere. And the only answer I can come up with is that's because there are computers that tell those flights where to fly and where they can't fly. And I just happen to, luckily or unluckily, if you want to really look at it that way, because I'm breathing all kinds of other stuff.
Can I just add this as well too?
Sure.
So along the lines of the airplane patterns that you're talking about, would it also not be, tell me if you think about this, the weather patterns that they're piggybacking the weather patterns in deploying the chemicals to then use the weather itself to promote its spread? Does that have any validity?
That's actually spot on, because what most people, when they think about weather, they anybody who uses the term weather control is missing the entire point. You cannot control the weather. They cannot control the weather. They cannot control. When I hate using terms like they, when scientists and companies, corporations, and governments, militaries, have been attempting to control the weather since, let's say, 1946, when cloud seeding was invented. In 2003, the National Research Council said, our opinion of cloud seeding is much the same as when we reviewed it 60 years ago. There is no efficacy in cloud seeding, meaning it's not science. It's junk science. They cannot prove that if we do X, then Y will happen. And the reason why is because of chaos in the climate, in the weather. There's too many variables. You cannot account for all of them. The variables are constantly changing. So when I think about weather modification, I think of it like this. If you had a stream, let's say the stream is exactly 2 feet wide and 6 inches deep, a very small trickle of a stream. Now let's imagine I take a rock that's 1 foot wide by 1 foot tall, perfectly round, and I set it right in the middle of that stream. That is weather modification. So what happens? The stream continues to flow. It just finds a different direction. So when I place this right in the middle of that stream, now what used to travel here has got to find its way around. It's got to find its way around. The same is true with chemicals or electromagnetic heating. If they put chemicals into the wind, it may change the way the winds flow. It may change whether there's updrafts, downdrafts, all of these things. It's what's also referred to as the butterfly effect. The saying goes, does a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil create tornadoes in Ohio, in Kansas? The butterfly effect is a real effect. And it goes to show that small changes in the atmosphere can have large impacts that are unknown and unaccountable. So if somebody is doing cloud seeding on the west coast of Canada, it could end up causing blizzards in New York because of the direction of the wind and all of that. Does that make sense? Even though their intention was simply to, let's give a real world example. Guy in Nebraska, he owns, million-acre corn farm. He buys weather insurance. It's a thing. Look it up. He buys weather insurance. So the weather insurance company says, if weather damages your crop, we will insure your crop for, $3 million. This is cool. But the insurance company wants to make damn sure that his corn crop does not get destroyed. So what does the insurance company do? It hires a cloud seeding company. And the cloud seeding company comes out and says, we will go up and we will do hail mitigation. We're not going to make it rain more on his farm. We're going to go up there and overseed this guy, put so many seeds that the hail can never get big enough to damage the crops. It'll be lots of itty bitty little hails. This is actually the way weather modification works nowadays. This is the money making schemes that they have. The problem with this, Bob owns a farm right down from him, and he doesn't care about weather insurance. He just feels like his crop isn't getting enough rain. Bob hires a cloud seeding company himself. So the insurance company hires Weather Modification Incorporated. He hires Western Weather Consultants, LLC. These are real world cloud seeding companies. And he tells Western Weather Consultants, hey, bro, can you make it rain on me? I'll make it rain on you. And they both go and do an operational cloud seeding project in the same area. One wants to make less hail. The other guy wants to make it rain. What do you think's going to happen? Nobody knows. It could not rain at all. It could rain. It could not have hail at all. It could have basketball size hail. Regardless, there's only a finite amount of water in the sky at any given time and a certain amount of cloud seeds for the water to attach to. They have to be in perfect harmony for rainfall to occur. If you get too many cloud seeds, you shut off rainfall. But what happens? When they're doing ground-based cloud seeding generators all along the Rocky Mountains, they operate October through March of every year here in America without fail. since 1949 when Irving P. Crick invented them. And this is called snowpack augmentation, or creating artificial snow. When all those cloud seeding generators are operating from October through March to put as much snow on top of the Rocky Mountains as possible, so that when it hits springtime and that snow melts, it can then feed all the rivers and tributaries, and they might have enough water to make it through the year, which they're always in the drought. So while they're doing that snowpack augmentation, also known as orographic cloud seeding, they claim it doesn't have any effects downwind. It's just local, man. You know, it's only, I mean, maybe 50 miles away from the mountain at the most, we find some cloud seeds, you know, like we find silver iodide, but that's it, man. I've interviewed these people. Like, I actually went to the American Meteorological Society's 21st conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification, and I've read all their journal entries. So they claim that it's only short downwind effects. However, if you overseed the sky and there's not enough water vapor available for it to create rain, then eventually it's going to make it to the East Coast of the United States, where I live. And over here, we don't have a water problem. In fact, trees create rain. Trees create their own cloud seeds. Trees create their own climate. This is a fact. And it was proven by Jasper Kirkby from CERN. He did the cloud project, Cosmics Leaving Outdoor Droplets. And he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that simply with a coniferous plant, a tree, a pine tree, some dust that came off a pine tree, some galactic cosmic rays, and water vapor, he was able to create a cloud in a chamber. Nothing else. So yes, trees can create their own rain. They create their own clouds. So you got all these jerks artificially modifying West Coast weather. Not enough rain falls, you know, and they put all of these cloud seeds into the sky. If you cut America in half, there are no operational cloud seeding projects on the East Coast, east of the center of the United States. They're all on the West Coast. But all of those artificial cloud seeds that they put into the air migrate eastward. And then what do we see every single winter? People complaining about baseball, softball size hail, monumental biblical, you know, blizzards, floods, things like that. So it's without a doubt that if you modify the weather, you break, you buy, is what I would like to say. That's part of what's in my Environmental Modification Accountability Act, is that if we were to actually require by law that anybody who modifies the weather give a prior notice at least 48 hours before they do these projects, and not just like they have to because of the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972, where the only reason I know that they do these cloud seeding projects in the Rocky Mountains from October through March is because they fill out a little sheet of paper and they send it to NOAA and they say, hey, we're going to modify the weather in 15,000 square kilometers from October through March. They don't say what day. They don't say what time. I want to know these things. We are well past the good old days of the 1970s. And this should be an updated in real time. We know when people are dumping chemicals or artificially ionizing the sky, because you can create rain with lasers. You can steer lightning bolts with lasers. We should know when this kind of stuff is going on so that we can track it in real time. And at the very least, whenever, somebody's doing a cloud seeding project and then there is, you can track the storm. You see the storm here, they put cloud seeds in it. Then it makes it over 2 states over and there are floods or a tornado, that the people here can go back and say, you were over here messing with that storm that landed in my town and destroyed my life and property. I'm taking you to court. That's when we'll see accountability. That's what I'm hoping for in my lifetime, is to see transparency, verification, and accountability for the people that are modifying the weather. Do they piggyback off of the natural processes? Of course. Do they recognize that during solar minimums and solar maximums, that weather is different? During a solar minimum, the ionosphere is weaker. That means that more galactic cosmic rays can penetrate deeper into the atmosphere, that more clouds form, that more hurricanes are prevalent. So during a solar minimum, they can get more bang for their buck if they're Dr. Evil type who wants to steer a hurricane and do a whole lot of damage. During a solar maximum, the sun's putting out a lot of power. That means that our ionosphere is really charged up and powerful. That means that people are more agitated. We won't get into bioelectric human effects, but I almost went off on a wild tangent. But needless to say, the ionosphere is our, Starship Enterprise shield from galactic cosmic rays. So there's less cloud formation during those times. So yes, trust me, the scientists who do this stuff for a living, the companies that profit from it, they all understand these long-term trends and they take advantage of them. And I just hope that there's some accountability for the downwind effects, the butterfly effects of these weather modification projects, because these people should be held accountable. They shouldn't be able to say, wasn't me, it was God. Oh, I mean, I don't believe in God. It's climate change. Climate change destroyed your town. It's all a bunch of BS, if you ask me.
Wow. Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Jim. And I turned my video on now because we have never seen each other before. So this is me. Hi.
Hey, well, it's good to finally see you.
Yeah, finally, exactly. We emailed back and forth. We were on the phone, and it was actually kind of funny when I phoned Jim the first time and introduced myself as Geoengineering Free Canada. Then he was like, "Yay, Canada is finally doing something!"
Yeah. Get on the bus. It's awesome to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. That was, again, wow, just absolutely fantastic, phenomenal information. Thank you so much for coming on. And I would like to just continue on with a few little things about geoengineering, what we are doing with the Geoengineering Free Coalition. And actually what you guys can do, I would like to pick that up because we would like to really take some serious action here. And so in what you can do actually is to help us to get this ball rolling here is, and certainly you can write all these letters to our useless MLAs and MPs. Yes, they are useless, but you know what? The more we bombard them and the more we get out to them, then they hopefully finally, stand up or whatever they do. But the more information we share with them, maybe we have a chance to, maybe to get them on board. Well, then certainly speak out, contact radio shows. For example, we've got this this radio thing here going on here in the Okanagan. Ask you and share your story. Well, send emails. We had that to MLAs, and you can host film nights. Jim's incredible videos are on YouTube. They're not taken down yet, so there you go. So that's a good sign. So you can just pull up those videos, get your people to do a potluck, come together and share the information. It's really, really informative, and so then you have a chance to share the information with people that are still not believing what's going on, right? So then network at large events. We've got the rallies going on here in the Okanagan. We've got here beautiful rallies every Saturday in Vernon. We've got them in Kelowna. We've got them all over the world, by the way. And then, well, take the pictures, take videos, share them with us. so that we can actually compile the data and find out a pattern. And like Jim said, and we want to find out when and where and what they are spraying. And that, by the way, leads me to what we have done just recently as the coalition admin. We filed an FOI to the Canadian military. So, and because there is, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a treaty between Canada, the Canadian military, and the US about weather modification. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so there you go. And so we filed that to the Canadian military. And the reason why Canadian military is because if we really want to go and take legal action at the end of the day, which we will do, and I personally will do that. And but we need Canadian evidence. So we need the Canadian, not just FOIs, but we need all the Canadian evidence to put that together in a lawsuit, in a court case. Then it's beautiful, and it's great to have the US findings and the US support. And I know that Jim is going to support us and all the evidence we can possibly get to put that together. But we need Canadian evidence because it's here in Canada. So the US findings will support that case, but we need here what's happening here. Join the group. So that's another thing you can do. Join us, join the coalition. We would love to have you here. We would love to have an action group here in Vernon, for example. We've got one in Prince George, we've got one on the island, we've got one in Ontario, and we've got one in the Kootenays. And so it's growing, and we need you guys to help us to get this ball rolling and to finally then hold them accountable. Yeah, and how you can start an action group is pretty simple too. We can help you with that. We've got all kinds of information, how you can, what you can do to help us form and grow the coalition. Yeah, so and that just quickly and briefly touch on what we have done so far and the actions we have taken. I already mentioned the FOIs. I filed one to Transport Canada on access request. I got it back in French. There you go. Okay, so I was like, thank you very much for that. It's kind of useless for me, so I emailed them back and asked them, can you just please get this in English to me? And they said, no, we are not going to do that. Yeah, I'm not kidding you. And yeah, geez, anyway, so that's what's going on here. So, and then I sent another FOI to BC, to the BC government, and they got back to me and they said, I have no idea what you're talking about. No clue. Of course not. Okay. We took snow samples. We went out and took snow samples, put them in to a lab, got them to a lab, and they came back with a significant increase in aluminum, in manganese, and strontium. That's, I believe, what it was. And yeah, so that's what we have done so far. We are sending out these letters as well. We are composing those letters to our useless MLAs and MPs. And we're going to take soil samples now that the snow is gone. We're going to take those and get them to the lab as well and see what happened after the snow melted, right? Because now that we know that there's all kinds of crap in the snow, because something must have fallen down, from the sky, because obviously it's happening in the sky. So then, there's the snow, and then now it's melting and it's going into the ground. So we need to know what's going on there, and is there any increase, or is there anything, what's happening there? Then on top of that, we want to take air samples. Well, that's a big project. So we are just now forming a group of people that are helping us to actually understand what needs to be done. We are in contact with Pilot already. We have we tracked down a lab in Ontario they are willing to help us with a kit, because we need a kit, obviously, and we need an aircraft, and we so that's a big project. So we are actually trying to get this ball rolling. It won't happen overnight for sure, because there's lots of organization, or we need to organize a lot, and not just that, it's certainly a lot of money that's involved in that, because, you know, hiring a pilot and getting an aircraft that can take us up really, really high, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim, as well, it's happening between 28,000 and 40,000 feet.
Yes. Ooh, I muted myself.
Yeah, okay, well, the
All right.
chemtrails.
Yeah, it's typically between say 29 to 40,000 feet. Some, if you're talking about military flights, they actually breach the tropopause. The tropopause is the area between the troposphere and the stratosphere. So some of the military flights get up as high as 60,000 feet. And those, obviously, the higher you go, the colder it gets, the bigger the clouds are, and the longer it's called residence time. So the chemicals, the higher you put them in the atmosphere, the longer they stay there. So if a plane were to, let's say at 12 kilometers, let's say 10 kilometers, lower flying planes, the residence time of the chemicals that come out of the back of the plane plus the clouds that they create is about 2 weeks. Whereas if you put those same chemicals at 60,000 feet, or let's say about 17 kilometers, 18 kilometers, 2 years. So for the exact same amount of chemicals, that big a difference because of the residence time is what they call it. The stratosphere, the winds, they blow much faster. They blow for longer periods of time, and they spread worldwide quicker. Whereas the closer you get to the ground, the closer you are to precipitating rain clouds that wash things out. So everything slowly trickles its way down, and there's a constant fallout from all of the aviation pollution. And in addition to any that was intentionally done for geoengineering purposes. So yeah, the higher you go, the longer it stays there. And I mean, for that matter, many geoengineering proposals included things like that Chinese spy balloon you saw flying over. It was hovering at 60,000 feet. And that is exactly where many of the proposals I heard for, as they call them, geoengineering lofting balloons. That's exactly where they want them at, 60,000 feet.
Okay, all right, well, see, this is an aircraft, I don't know what kind of an aircraft that could be, probably a Learjet or something. So there's huge costs involved in order to get a project like this started and to really get some results. Anyway, so that's one of our future actions. It's certainly will take some time. In the meantime, we are planning, or just hinting on a giant event we are planning on in the summertime. I can't release a lot more. I can't disclose a lot more, but it's going to be big. That's promised. Anyway, so these are our actions, and I hope that you guys will take some action here too. It's whatever we can do to help you, please email us, go on our website. It's geoengineeringfreecanada.com. There is our email. There's all kinds of information, and there's links to climateviewer.com as well, and all kinds of videos already. So we are linked. We are not.
Well, I'll do you one better. Make sure I get a full copy of this video, and I'll put this video up on my YouTube channel. And that way everybody can get in contact with you as well. Just so people know, Dane Wigington I said Dane Wigington, and the second I did, there goes my firewall again. I don't know what that is, but I'm blocking it. Dane Wigington, in his latest film, The Deming, went through how at first they wanted to fly a Cessna up there to do some sampling, and then later on they got a Learjet, and they went through all of the different tools that they use and all of that. But when they actually, if you watch it very carefully, you'll see that the particles that they're showing on the slides in the dimming are on the micron level. The difference between a micron and a nanometer is exponential. So being able to collect nanoparticles, the price would be prohibitive for us if we tried for the next 5 years to get the funds together to try to get something up there and then get enough sampling material and then be able to determine what was, literally rubbed off our fingers, let alone, the amount of science that goes into collecting nanoparticles at that atmospheric height and the types of sensors required. There's only been 2 studies ever done at the most prestigious, universities who have unlimited budgets. They're over there going, darn, I wish we could afford better equipment. So this is a monumental challenge to get accurate sampling data of nanoparticles that are entrained in the stratosphere. I think it's more realistic to try to get, something from a freshly emitted contrail. If it's going to be a tricky one though, because honestly, I've been involved with a couple of discussions with people who were, talking about doing some very pirate flights. And they wanted to get behind, say, like a KC-135 or, a military plane and just fly through the exhaust trails and see what was in them. And in one particular case, they were warned that they were going to be shot down. So there's a lot of control mechanisms in just being able to get up to that altitude. But one of the reasons I interviewed Dr. Rangasai Halthori is because they're actually doing the exact test you're talking about right now. That's why I mentioned looking at biofuels for contrail control. It's called the Access 1 and Access 2 flights, and then it becomes the Eclipse 2 and the NASA DLR joint studies. Basically, NASA and Germany's NASA, which is called the DLR, they're the only ones with the equipment to actually be able to show all of this stuff. And I've been beating Dr. Halthori's door down for the results, which he does not want to show me. But they're trying right now to change the way the clouds are made. And you actually can see a Learjet, which is a flying laboratory, flying behind a Boeing DC-10. And they're literally, the pilot can barely even hold the plane there because turbulence and all that. And they're literally sniffing, they're huffing the chemtrails. And those studies are going on right now. And I have not seen anything, publicly published. But it is a monumental problem to get some data we can trust, because I don't trust any of them. You don't trust any of them. How do we get that? We need to find a sugar daddy that cares about this topic and is willing to pony up for some really fancy gadgets that are only going to be used a couple times, or lend us his, private plane and turn it into a flying lab. And that's what he does all day long. But yeah, it's a real problem.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So we are coming to the end of our presentation. Well, Jim, once again, thank you so much. We are.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, anytime, and we keep in touch, and we email back and forth, and we text back and forth.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. All right, well, end this presentation right now, and thank you very much for coming out, and I hope you had a good experience and learned a lot, because this man is just incredible. Thanks again. Have a good night. Thank you. Okay, Jim, I'm gonna end now. Thank
All right.
you.
Have
Okay,
a great
bye-bye.
day. Bye.
Bye-bye.